Chapter 8: Growth and Challenges for the Bank for the Poor, 1984 to 1990. Bangladesh has long attracted people who study population related issues. They tell us that we are poor because there are too many of us on too small a piece of land. Approximately the size of Florida, Bangladesh has a population of about 120 million. If half of the US population decided to move to Florida, those people would experience the population density we now have in Bangladesh. What does all this mean for Bangladesh? Should we curtail birth rates? I believe there is a strong element of fear-mongering in population policies promoted by international development agencies. We in the third world often blindly echo these views, raising even more fear at home. Since Bangladesh became an independent country, our population has almost doubled, but we're certainly not twice as poor. Indeed, we're better off today than we were 27 years ago. We have fewer food shortages, and though we feed twice the population, we are far more self-sufficient in food grains. My suspicion is that governments and international agencies choose to scare people into action to distract attention from their own ineptitude. Rather than limiting population growth, they should concentrate on improving the economic status of the people in general and the people at the bottom half in particular. Governments and population agencies are not putting nearly as much effort into changing the quality of life of the poor as they put into their scare tactics such as pressuring illiterate men and women to physically remove their ability to procreate. UN studies conducted in more than 40 developing countries show that the birth rate falls as women gain equality. And the reasons for this are numerous. Education delays marriage and procreation. Better educated women are more likely to use contraceptives and more likely to earn a livelihood. I believe that income earning opportunities that empower poor women and bring them into organizational folds, folds, will have more impact on curbing population growth than the current system of encouraging family planning practices through intimidation tactics. Family planning should be left to the family. The Grameen Bank is often cited in population discussions because the adoption of family planning measures among Grameen families is twice the national rate of Bangladesh. During the Cairo Population Conference of September 1994, it was also noted that the birth rate among Grameen families is significantly lower than the national average. Once they have increased their incomes through self-employment, Grameen borrowers show remarkable determination to have fewer children, educate the ones they have, and participate actively in our democracy. If microcredit can help bring family planning awareness to families, why do not government and international agencies, which are so concerned about population growth, promote microcredit more actively than they do? Could it be because microcredit runs as a profit-oriented business? Are there vested interests in the current population programs? I believe that the emphasis on curbing population growth diverts attention from the more vital issue of pursuing policies that allow the population to take care of itself. The sooner we rearrange our priorities, the better it will be for all people on the planet, now and in the future. I first began to see societal problems being solved, one Grameen family at a time. During annual workshops we held for center leaders at each branch. These workshops gathered together center leaders to review their problems and achievements, to identify areas of concern, and to look for solutions to social and economic challenges. The workshops worked so well that we held a national workshop of selected center leaders in 1980 in Tangail, Tangail. At the end of it, we wrote down 4 decisions resolved on by the group. We did not expect these decisions to be taken more seriously than the proceedings of the meeting, but we soon started getting requests for copies from centers throughout Bangladesh. At our second national session in 1982, we concluded the workshop with 10 decisions. These 10 decisions were increased to 16 in our 1984 workshop in Joydepur. We never imagined how deeply these decisions would affect our members. Today, at every Grameen branch, our members take enormous pride in reciting the 16 decisions. They are as follows. 1. We shall follow and advance the 4 principles of the Grameen Bank discipline: unity, courage, and hard work in all walks of our lives. Prosperity we shall bring to our families. 3. We shall not live in a dilapidated house. We shall repair our houses and work toward constructing new houses at the earliest opportunity. 4. We shall grow vegetables all the year round. We shall eat plenty of them and sell the surplus. 5. During the plantation seasons, we shall plant as many seedlings as possible. 6. We shall plan to keep our families small. We shall minimize our expenditures. We shall look after our health. 7. We shall educate our children and ensure that they can earn to pay for their education. Number 8. We shall always keep our children and the environment clean. Number 9. We shall build and use pit latrines. Pit latrines. 10. We shall drink water from tube wells. If they are not available, we shall boil water or use alum to purify it. Use alum, alum to purify it. 11. We shall not take any dowry at our sons' weddings. Neither shall we give any dowry at our daughter's wedding. We shall keep the center free from the curse of dowry. We shall not practice child marriage. 12. We shall not commit any injustice, and we will oppose anyone who tries to do so. 13. We shall collectively undertake larger investments for higher incomes. 14. We shall always be ready to help each other. If anyone is in difficulty, we shall all help him or her. 15. If we come to know of any branch of discipline in any center, we shall all go there and help restore discipline. 16. We shall introduce physical exercises in all our centers. We shall take part in all social activities collectively. Now, in our national workshops, I plead with the participants not to increase the number of decisions. I argue that we should concentrate on doing a good job implementing the existing 16 decisions rather than adding new ones. Local branches of Grameen, however, may formulate decisions that address problems specific to their areas. These decisions are a demonstration that the poor, once economically empowered, are the most determined fighters in the battle to solve the population problem and illiteracy and live healthier, better lives. When policymakers finally realize that the poor are their partners rather than bystanders or enemies, we will progress much faster than we do today. Bangladesh is a land of natural disasters. This is an unfortunate but unavoidable factor in our business. But no matter what cataclysm, weather disaster, or personal tragedy befalls a borrower, our philosophy is always to get that person to pay back his or her loan, even if it is only at the rate of a half penny a week. This discipline is meant to boost the borrower's sense of self-reliance, pride, and confidence. To forgive a loan can undo years of difficult work in getting the borrower to believe in his or her own ability. If a flood or a famine decimates a village and kills the borrower's crops or animals, we immediately lend them new money to start up again. We never wipe out old loans, but convert them into very long-term loans and try to get the borrower to pay them off more slowly and in smaller installments. In the extreme case where a borrower dies, we disperse funds from the Central Emergency Fund, a life insurance fund for borrowers, to the deceased family as soon as possible. We then ask the group or center to adopt a new member from that same family to bring the group number back up to 5. Bangladesh has so many natural disasters that one area may be hit by several in the same year. It has happened that a village, a district, or a whole region is hit by floods as many as 4 times in 1 year, which can completely wipe out all the savings and assets of a family. We experienced severe flooding in 1981, 1985, 1987, and especially 1988, when our plight was broadcast overseas by the international media. There were also localized disasters such as the tornado that hit the Manikganj district in 1989. Grame's operational procedures in such situations are always the same. First, we suspend all rules and regulations of the bank. The local bank manager and all bank personnel are directed to immediately scour the region to save as many lives as possible and to provide shelter, medicine, food, and protection. Second, the bank workers visit the houses of our members and try to re-establish the victims' confidence by letting them know that the bank and their fellow members are ready to support them. We then find out what the survivors need and make provisions to provide it. We provide emergency food as well as water and saline solution to prevent dehydration and diarrhea. Emergency seeds for planting and cash for buying new cattle and new capital assets are also distributed. Disaster loans are provided. We want to give our members time to mourn their loved ones, but we do not want them to sink into apathy and lethargy from despair. We want them to start right up again thinking of survival schemes. Because national and international relief is usually late and inadequate, the only way that victims can get through the pain, suffering, and devastation is by rebuilding what they have. During periods of disaster, old loans are rescheduled and a grace period is accorded for repayment. In a special meeting, the local center is given the authority to decide how long this grace period should last. We also look into long-term plans that will make the area safer, such as building cyclone shelters. Many of our Grameem branch offices along the coast are now built in solid, reinforced concrete. Grameem keeps no overall statistics on how many natural catastrophes it has had to overcome, but I estimated about 5% of our loans go to survivors of natural catastrophes. Pramila Rani Ghosh's story illustrates the kind of disaster that often confront our borrowers. In 1971, during the War of Liberation, Pramila's house was burned down twice by the Pakistani army. She joined Graeme in 1984. In 1986, she contracted enteritis, enteritis. She contracted enteritis and went into Tangail Hospital. She was operated on and was told not to work for several years. Her fellow group members suggested she take a loan from their group fund to pay for her operation, but as there was not enough money, she sold her cow and her grocery shop. She was given a new loan with which she bought milk cows. When these died of an unknown disease, she went to her weekly center and took out a loan of $60 from the group fund with which she bought a new cow. During the floods of 1988, the village of Chabisha was under water and Pramila's house was destroyed. She lost all her crops. For 3 weeks, an epidemic raged in the village. The bank staff visited the villagers daily to distribute water purification tablets. Pramila, along with thousands of other Gramean families, received 40 kilos of wheat. She paid back the value of that wheat into a center disaster fund. She also bought vegetable seeds from us, which we sold at cost. 3 weeks later, when the situation had normalized, she was able to reopen her grocery store. In 1992, the fire from an oil lamp spread and burned down Pramila's house. Neighbors and villagers tried to help her extinguish the fire, but in the ensuing blaze, Pramila lost all her crops, food, her entire grocery store, and her 2 cows. All that was left were the clothes she and her husband had on their backs. The morning after the fire, the Gramean staff visited Pramila and organized a special meeting at which they offered her a loan from the center's disaster fund. Instead, she decided to take out a seasonal loan and a loan from her group fund. Part of the loan she used to start up a small grocery store, and the rest she invested in fertilizer for her irrigated land. With the help of her 3 grown sons, she was able to start paying off the loan. 3 months later, Graeme granted her a housing loan, and she constructed herself a new home. Pramila is currently on her 12th loan. She owns and leases enough land to feed her whole family and sell about 10 mounds MAUNDS, 10 mounds of rice paddy a year. From the very beginning, Graeme has gone against traditional methods of poverty alleviation by handing out cash without any attempt to first provide skills training. We have received a great deal of criticism for this policy, even from some of our friends. In Jovra, we simply did not see any need for formal training, and our experience in the 1980s gave us more confidence that we had taken the right approach. Why give credit first? I firmly believe that all human beings have an innate skill. I call it the survival skill. The fact that the poor are alive is clear proof of their ability. They do not need us to teach them how to survive. Again, I firmly believe that all human beings have an innate skill. I call it the survival skill. The fact that the poor are alive is clear proof of their ability. They do not need us to teach them how to survive. They already know how to do this. So rather than waste our time teaching them new skills, we try to make maximum use of their existing skills. Giving the poor access to credit allows them to immediately put into practice the skills they already know: to weave, husk rice, paddy, raise cows, pedal a rickshaw, and the cash they earn is then a tool, a key that unlocks a host of other abilities and allows them to explore their own potential. Often borrowers teach each other new techniques that allow them to better use their survival skills. They teach far better than we ever could. Government decision makers, many NGOs, and international consultants usually start the work of poverty alleviation by launching very elaborate training programs. They do this because they begin with the assumption that people are poor because they lack skills. Training also perpetuates their own interests by creating more jobs for themselves without the responsibility of having to produce any concrete results. Thanks to the flow of aid and welfare budgets, a huge industry has evolved worldwide for the sole purpose of providing such training. Experts on poverty alleviation insist that training is absolutely vital for the poor to move up the economic ladder. But if you go out into the real world, you cannot miss seeing that the poor are poor not because they are untrained or illiterate, but because they cannot retain the returns of their labor. They have no control over capital, and it is the ability to control capital that gives people the power to rise out of poverty. Profit is unshamedly biased toward capital. In their powerless state, the poor work for the benefit of someone who controls the productive assets. Why can they not control any capital? Because they do not inherit any capital or credit, and nobody gives them access to it because they are not considered creditworthy. I believe that many training programs are counterproductive. If Graeme had required borrowers to attend a training program in business management before taking out a loan to start a business, most of them would have been scared away. Formal learning is a threatening experience for our borrowers. It can even destroy their natural capacity or make them feel small, stupid, and useless. Also, poor people are often offered incentives to participate in training programs. Sometimes they receive immediate financial benefits in the form of a training allowance, or training is made a prerequisite to obtaining other important benefits in cash or in kind. This attracts the poor, even though they may not be interested in the training itself. This is not to say that all training is bad, but training should not be forced on people. It should be offered only when they actively seek it out and are willing to pay in kind or cash to obtain it. Gramean borrowers, for example, do look for training. They might want to read the numbers in their passbooks, for example, or figure out what amounts have been paid and how much remains to be paid back. Often Gramean borrowers want to be able to read the 16 decisions, keep accounts, or follow business news. Or they may want to learn about poultry raising, cattle raising, or new ways of planting, storing, and processing crops. Gramean is also bringing new technology to them: cellular telephones, solar energy, the internet. Soon, borrowers will need to calculate the cost of telephone calls or read the words on a computer screen. Even before I started the Gramean Bank, I had been a critic of international aid agencies in Bangladesh. By far, the most influential agency and the one I have most criticized is the World Bank. The World Bank and Gramean have been through so many fights and disagreements over the years that some commentators have labeled as sparring partners. SPARRING, sparring partners. There have always been a few individuals in the World Bank who understand what microcredit is all about, but our styles are so radically different that for many years we have spent more time and energy fighting each other than helping each other. One public confrontation occurred at the World Food Day teleconference of 1986. Patricia Young, national coordinator of the U.S. Committee for World Food Day, invited me to be a panelist along with the World Bank's then president Barbara Conable at a teleconference that would be broadcast by satellite to 30 countries. I had no idea what a teleconference was, but I accepted the invitation as an opportunity to explain why I felt credit should be accepted as a human right and how credit could play a strategic role in removing hunger from the world. I had not intended to go into battle against the World Bank president, but Conable provoked me by stating that the World Bank provided financial support to Grameen in Bangladesh. I thought I should correct this erroneous information, and I politely interjected that the World Bank did no such thing. Conable paid no attention. Again, he stated that World Bank funds helped Grameen. This time I firmly contradicted him. Conable ignored my protest and repeated that the World Bank provided financial support to the Grameen Bank. I thought I should make the truth clear to satellite TV viewers. We at the Grameen Bank have never wanted or accepted World Bank funding because we do not like the way the bank conducts business. Their experts and consultants often take over the projects they finance. They do not rest until they have molded things their way. MOLDED. They have molded things their way. We do not want anyone to come and meddle with our system or to tell us how to behave. Indeed, just that year we had actually rejected a $200 million low-interest loan from the World Bank. I also told Conable, who was bragging about employing the best minds in the world, that hiring smart economists does not necessarily translate into policies and programs that benefit the poor. I find multilateral donors' style of doing business with the poor very disconcerting. I can cite one example of my experience in the island of Negros in the Philippines. In 1989, a Grameen replication program called Project Dungannon had been launched in response to the growing malnutrition among island children. Several years after it had been established, Dr. Cecily Del Castillo, Project Dungannon's founder, asked a UN agency for money to expand her program. The agency responded by sending 4 missions to investigate her proposal, spending thousands of dollars on airline tickets, paradigms, DIEMS, paradigms, and professional fees. Due to bureaucratic complications, however, the project never received a single penny. In other words, after nearly 5 years of specialists reviewing the problem and wasting precious resources, the poor islanders were unable to receive a single microcredit loan with support from this agency. I cannot help but remark that, had the Negros project received an amount equal to the cost of a single UN mission, it could have assisted several hundred poor families. The growth of the consultancy business has seriously misled international donor agencies. The assumption is that the recipient countries need to be guided at every stage of the process during identification, preparation, and implementation of projects. Donors and consultants tend to become overbearing in their attitude toward the countries they help. Furthermore, these consultants often have a paralyzing effect on the initiatives of the recipient countries. Officials and academics in these countries quickly adopt the figures mentioned in the donors' documents, even if they personally know that those figures are incorrect. After 1986, when Graeme made it clear to the World Bank that we would not let it tell us how to run our business, the bank decided to try to form its own microcredit organization in Bangladesh by combining our methodology with those of a number of other microcredit programs. I thought the idea was wholly unrealistic. Ultimately, the Bangladesh government took our advice and resisted the World Bank initiative, but the World Bank did not learn anything from the process. On the contrary, it removed the name Bangladesh from the rejected project document and offered it to the Sri Lankan government instead. My less than pleasant experience with the World Bank spurred me to learn as much as I could about development agencies. One observation that became increasingly apparent is that multilateral aid institutions have a lot of money to disburse. Officials determine target amounts for each country. The more money officials manage to give out, the better grade they receive as lending officers. Therefore, young, ambitious officers of a donor agency will choose the projects with the biggest price tag. By moving a lot of money, their name moves up the promotion ladder. In my line of work, I have often witnessed the desperation of donor agency officials to give away ever larger sums of money to Bangladesh. They will do almost anything to achieve this, including bribing government officials and politicians either directly or indirectly. For instance, they will rent newly built, expensive houses owned by government officials or invite them on attractive foreign trips under the guise of official workshops and conferences. Consultants, suppliers, and potential contractors often facilitate this bribing mechanism. After all, they are the ones who most benefit from projects funded by donors. One research institution in Bangladesh estimates that of the more than $30 billion in foreign donor assistance received in the past 26 years, 75% was not spent in Bangladesh. It was spent on equipment, commodities, and consultants from the donor country itself. Most rich nations use their foreign aid budget mainly to employ their own people and to sell their own goods. With poverty reduction as an afterthought, the 25% that is spent in Bangladesh usually goes straight to a tiny elite of local suppliers, contractors, consultants, and experts. Much of this money is used by these elites to buy foreign-made consumer goods, which is of no help to our country's economy or workforce. And there is a general belief that a good chunk of donor money ends up as kickbacks to officials and politicians who have helped make purchase decisions and sign contracts. The situation is the same in all countries receiving aid, which amounts to $50 to $55 billion a year. Aid-funded projects create massive bureaucracies which quickly become corrupt and inefficient, incurring huge losses. In a world that trumpets the superiority of the market economy and free enterprise, Aid money still goes to expand government spending, often acting against the interests of the market economy. Most foreign aid goes to building roads, bridges, and so forth, which are supposed to help the poor in the long run. The only people really benefiting from most of this aid, however, are those who are already wealthy. Foreign aid becomes a kind of charity for the powerful while the poor get poorer. If aid is to have some impact on the lives of the destitute, it must be rerouted, rerouted so that it reaches poor households more directly. I believe that a new aid methodology has to be designed with new objectives. In fact, the direct elimination of poverty should be the objective of all development aid. Development should be viewed as a human rights issue, not as a question of simply increasing the gross national product (GNP). When the national economy picks up, the situation of the poor is not necessarily improved. Therefore, development should be redefined. It should refer only to a positive measurable change in per capita income of the bottom 50% of the population. One day, I was approached by an American journalist who was openly irritated by my apparently endless carping against development aid, carping, C-A-R-P-I-N-G, carping against development aid organizations such as the World Bank. Like many others, he saw the World Bank as a benevolent and enlightened organization doing its best at a thankless task. He raised his microphone in the air between us and said in a challenging voice, "Instead of always being so critical, could you tell me what concrete steps you would take if you became president of the World Bank?" "I have never thought of what I would do if I were president of the World Bank," I said coolly. "But I suppose the first thing I would do would be to move the headquarters to Dhaka." Why on earth would you do that? Well, if, as Lewis Preston, then president of the World Bank, says, the overarching objective of the World Bank is to combat world poverty, then it seems to me that bank should be moved to a location where poverty is at its worst. In Dhaka, the World Bank would be surrounded by human suffering and destitution. By living in close proximity to the problem, bank officials might be able to solve it faster and more realistically. The interviewer nodded. He seemed less agitated than at the start of the interview. Also, if the headquarters were moved to Dhaka, many of the bank's 5,000 employees would simply refuse to come. Dhaka is not known for its vibrant social life and is certainly not a choice spot for a world banker to raise children. I think that many would voluntarily retire or change jobs. This would help achieve two things. First, it would ease out those who are not completely devoted to fighting poverty. Second, it would reduce costs, as Dhaka's salaries would be much lower than those required in expensive Washington, D.C., and that was the end of that. Yeah. In 1987, when I was visiting the United States, I had a much more productive meeting with the American press. I was speaking before a congressional committee. At the end of the hearing, I was rushed to a tiny room where someone was busy talking into a speakerphone. I had no idea how a telephone conference call worked and no one had briefed me. But there I was, faced with a speakerphone and 14 editorial writers from leading daily newspapers waiting on the line to ask me questions. The person initially talking on the speakerphone was Sam Daly Harris, an ex-high school teacher turned social activist. Sam had started a national volunteer network called Responsibility for Ending Starvation using legislation known as RESULTS, R-E-S-U-L-T-S. Every month he held nationwide meetings with all his volunteers over the phone. What I had stepped into was a press conference. Sam is extremely affable, A-F-F-A-B-L-E, extremely affable, and he spoke in a way that briefed the news writers and me at the same time. I then took questions. The first conference call lasted for an hour. There was a short break, and then another one began with 14 more editorial writers from various American dailies. That day I learned just how effective results could be. The resulting editorials helped ensure the passage of legislation in December 1987 that required USAID to devote $50 million to funding microcredit programs for the poor, despite strong opposition by the Reagan administration. Sam and I became instant friends. Unassuming and unimposing, he is as solid as a rock when it comes to fighting poverty and hunger. Today, Results has sister organizations in 6 countries: the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Japan, and Australia. These organizations have endorsed microcredit as a key anti-poverty strategy and work through their grassroots network of citizen activists to ensure it is noticed by the community, the media, elected representatives, and the national government. They have pushed government aid agencies and private agencies for more funding for microcredit programs. They have lobbied treasury departments and ministries to pressure the World Bank into paying more attention to poverty issues, not just once, but every year since the mid-1980s. They have also campaigned for programs and policies that would reduce poverty in their own countries. In fact, Results, RESULTS, Results in the United States has created a sub-organization called Results Domestic that is a leading advocate for microcredit initiatives in the United States. Over the past 10 years, the bond between Results and Graeme has strengthened. Each Results volunteer sooner or later becomes an expert on Graeme. The 1987 conference calls accomplished another milestone in the history of the microcredit movement. They attracted the attention of CBS's 60 Minutes in 1989. Two CBS TV crews, one from London and another from Rome, came to visit Dhaka. I spent long hours with the CBS correspondent, Morley Safer, visiting Graeme villages and interviewing borrowers, development experts, and government officials. In all, the crews took over 100 hours of film footage and boiled it down to just 12 minutes. Broadcast in March 1990, the segment became an instant hit. I had never fully realized the power of the media until then. Even today, we receive letters and phone calls from around the world when the show is rebroadcast in just 12 minutes. In just 12 minutes, CBS had brought out the essence of Graeme in a most inspiring way. The film moved people to action and activism more than any media coverage before or since. Well, I talked about microcredit in the 1980s, whether to World Bank, economists, or journalists. Most people assumed that I was trying to alleviate poverty by lending to small businesses that would then expand and hire the poor. It took people a while to see that I actually advocated lending to the poor directly. Policymakers tend to equate job creation with poverty reduction, and economists tend to recognize only one kind of employment: salaried employment. And economists tend to focus their research and theories on the origins of wealth in the former colonial powers, not on the micro level reality of poor people in third world countries. Whatever attention is given to poverty comes under the rubric of so-called development economics, a field that emerged only after the Second World War, and that has basically remained an afterthought or reinterpretation of the main body of economic theory. Worst of all, economists have failed to understand the social power of credit. In economic theory, credit is seen merely as a means with which to lubricate the wheels of trade, commerce, and industry. In reality, credit creates economic power, which quickly translates into social power. When credit institutions and banks make rules that favor a distinct section of the population, that section increases both its economic and its social status. In both rich and poor countries alike, credit institutions have favored the rich and in so doing have pronounced a death sentence on the poor. Why have economists remained silent while banks rejected the poor as unworthy of credit? Nobody can provide a convincing answer. Because of this silence and indifference, banks have imposed a financial apartheid and gotten away with it. If economists would only recognize the powerful socio-economic implications of credit, they might recognize the need to promote credit as a human right. The shortcomings of the core economic theories remain unchallenged. Microeconomic theory, for example, which plays a central role in the analytical framework of economics, is incomplete. It views individual human beings as either consumers or laborers and essentially ignores their potential as self-employed individuals. This theoretical dichotomy between entrepreneurs and laborers disregards the creativity and ingenuity of each human being and considers widespread self-employment in third world countries as a symptom of underdevelopment. In many third world countries, the overwhelming majority of people make a living through self-employment. Not knowing where to fit these individuals into their analytical framework, economists lump them in a catch-all category, catchall catch-all category called the informal sector. But the informal sector really represents the people's own effort to create their own jobs. I prefer to call it the people's economy, a term often used by a Graeme, a German friend of mine, Karl Osner, who has played a critical role in educating Europeans about microcredit. Any economist with a real understanding of society would have come forward to increase the efficiency of this people's economy rather than undermine it. In the absence of economists' support, organizations like Graeme must step into the breach. This is the end of the chapter 8, Growth and Challenges for the Bank for the Poor, 1990. This is the end of the chapter 8. On the next episode, I'll read the next chapter, chapter 9, Applications in Other Poor Countries. But until then, thanks for your enthusiasm and curiosity to listen and learn more. Take care.